Well, welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Chad Galster, and I'm a film and television editor. And primarily right now, I work for a man named Taylor Sheridan. So I've been with Taylor since season 1 of a show called Yellowstone that we do. So I've worked with him on all 4 seasons of that. We did a movie earlier this year called Those Who Wish Me Dead, starring Angelina Jolie, which was a lot of fun. Right now, what we have on the air is a show called 1883, which is a prequel to Yellowstone that we have been working on like crazy for the past 6 or 7 months now. So that's what I do. I edit film and television. I've been doing it for around 20 years. I've done a little bit of everything at this point in my life. And the last 4 or 5 years working for Taylor has probably been the most fun, but I like my job. It's a weird job that not many folks understand, which makes sense to me. But I love it. It's sort of tailor-made for who I am.
It's awesome. That was actually how I found you. I've been geeking out on Yellowstone. I love this series, and then cool. I've been watching.
It's really having a bit of a moment culturally.
Right?
Like for some reason, it's all of a sudden in everybody's heads and on the tip of their tongues.
It is, and one of the things that I am not anywhere near. I wouldn't call myself an editor, but I've been a video producer, and I do media here with my wife in Vietnam, and and just when I was watching the editing style, like how, and I just was like sitting there, I was like, I really, really would love to find out who edited this, and to ask you, how do you approach editing something that's so epic? Like, I mean, there's such a scale to the edits, and how do you start approaching editing projects like this? Where do you start, man?
Right. Well, to be fair, there's a couple of other very talented editors also that work on the show. It's fair to say that I spend the most time working directly with Taylor, just the nature of our relationship and the history that we have. So I've worked on almost every episode of Yellowstone, so I believe I could speak to that. You don't think of it that way. I mean, it's a story about people, and ultimately, as long as you've got to tell a story about people, because the people and the characters are what your audience is going to connect to. Now, they inhabit this world that is spectacular and beautiful, and part of what I think appeals to people about that show is a glimpse into that part of Montana or, in 1883, that part of our history. And the spectacle is important, and it's real, but it's always coming out of the reason to show it is always coming out of something that's going on with the characters. And I think that's what probably, and in my mind, that's what appeals to people about the show, is that they're experiencing a world they haven't seen before, and they care about it because they care about the people that are in front of them in the show. If we're doing it right, I mean, it's really the only way to do it and have it last, otherwise it's just sort of like someone's photo album and some pretty pictures, and you watch it for a couple minutes. You're like, okay, I've seen that. It looks like you had a nice vacation, very pretty, but I care about it. For instance, if I was your friend, I'd care about it because of you, and I'd want to see the other pictures of you in the car, and your kids spilled a soda, and everyone's like, oh, freaking out, So you have to tie it back to characters and people, and that's what it's one of the things Taylor does exceptionally well. He's a very talented writer, and he tells these stories about topics and things that we all believe we know a little bit something about, and we do, whether it be ranching. We have an idea of what it is to be a cowboy, or we have an idea, for the current show, what it was to be on a wagon trail west of Oregon. But he tells it through the eyes of characters that you've just never met. You've never met these people before, and not even anything close to them. So I think that's what resonates with people about our show. I've had some time to think about it, and I believe that that's what it is. Is that it all comes back to the characters and their stories, and we care about these people.
Yeah, and I think that, like, one of the things that you have with that you pointed out with the characters, and especially with Yellowstone, because I recently binge watched everything again.
Oh, good.
And you have such these. So this is what was fascinating to me, right? Because you have these different archetypes. You have true, you ever see those infographics where they were like true good, neutral good,
Sure. Yeah.
And you have those different characters. And one of the things that I feel like is done really well with Yellowstone is you have these characters that are all along this chart of morality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you still...
Yeah, Taylor is fond of saying through the words of the characters that there's no such thing as right and wrong.
Yeah.
And I will never pretend to speak for him and what he means. But to me, it's just that people act in their own interest and they do what they think is best for their families without, really trying to make anyone else happy.
Yeah.
And there's a survival instinct that our characters have that's born out of necessity and where they live and the kind of lifestyle that they have. And, in Yellowstone, people besieged on all sides from people with different nefarious interests. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it is. It's not about right and wrong. People are just different.
Yeah.
And they behave the way they do because they're trying to survive and they want their family to be happy. Someone else's, they're not looking to hurt anybody else, but really their focus is on their family, their land, and their experience. So that's what motivates them.
And it's so awesome. And one of the cool things about what your role is too, because you have everything to in making a movie. There was this really great infographic that I saw once, and it was like what a movie would look like without a costume department, what a movie would look like without good sound.
Sure. Okay.
Saw this picture, and it was like what a movie would look like without a costume department. It had a bunch of people standing around naked. What movie would look like without like good cinematography, and it was a kind of a cartoon, but it's really interesting. You have all of these different departments that are doing an amazing job. Between set design, wardrobe, the cinematography team. You have phenomenal actors. Like, let's be real, you're doing a great job.
100%. Absolutely.
But then the glue that kind of holds it all together is the editing, because you have this where everything has to come together in post. And it's like because.
Well, yeah, like you said, I mean, everyone has done some form of my job. Like you said, you do media things with your wife. Yeah. Well, that's editing right there. I mean, without an editor on a film or TV show, you'd have about 60 or 70 hours of footage that you would watch, right? And and after a while, it would get very boring. Take it back to the vacation thing. Like, let's say you take 400 pictures on a road trip of, to Mount Rushmore.
Right.
Okay. You don't want to show your friends the 400 pictures. You want to pick the 20 that tell the story of that journey for you.
Exactly.
And you want to make sure that you include the beautiful scenery, but also, again, the little moments with your family that people that know you would care about. And so that's what this job is. Look, there are hundreds of people who are responsible for these shows being what they are. There's generally one cinematographer, there's generally one editor, and so you can be lulled into thinking that person is like responsible somehow for the quality. We are very much collectively responsible to the folks that are like, even the folks that are keeping the crew fed. I mean, if your crew is miserable, their performance are affected. So it all very much depends on itself, and the people that do all those jobs take a ton of pride in what they do, rightly so, and it takes all of us. But yes, the fact is that you do all that stuff, you collect all of this material, and then the fun part of my job is that I'm the first one that gets to watch the TV show that you make out of it. It's right here. I mean, this is my home studio, and put the scenes together, and then the scenes become acts, and then the acts become a full TV show or a full movie. Put sound effects and music to it, and I get to be that first audience for it, and that's a real thrill. It's a very quiet, private thing that happens in this room where this show that hundreds of people are responsible for making gets distilled down to this like one version of it that I get to watch, and then Taylor gets to watch it, and then some other people get to watch it, and then ultimately the goal is to take it out into the world and show everybody. But it's a thrill. I mean, I've been doing this for, like I said, for a while, and that never gets old.
That's awesome.
The thrill of watching the TV show for the first time, just sitting down and watching it by myself.
It's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
Now, this is a question that I have, because one of the things that I when I editing a music video for my wife, and we've shot, and so my wife is a famous singer here in Vietnam. She was the first winner of Vietnam Idol, and I do all of her music videos.
Awesome.
And so I shoot and edit them, and when we've shot something, and I've got 40 different takes of the same thing, it to me, and and that's nothing compared to what you're cutting down. I know you're dealing with a mountain of data. And so I mean, it's not like there's only so much time in every day to shoot. So we might, if we shoot a scene, we might shoot it. We might have
6, 8, 10 setups, and each setup usually has a minimum of 3 cameras. You're looking at like 30 different camera positions and ways to view a scene across takes. But it's not like it's, what you're describing is a lot of footage. Like anytime, if you have more than 10 takes, there's just about 1,000 ways that you could put it together. Yeah. And then that you just have to decide which way feels correct to you.
And so that was kind of my question, because I feel like sometimes when I start leaning into this, I'm like, wow, this is daunting. And so what I do is, I'm really meticulous on structure, on organization. All right. So, types, okay, what camera was this from? Here, color code it. And then, the second this camera was here, different angle, color coding. And so that's because if I don't have some type of system to make sense of the madness, I get lost. Yeah. How do you start approaching it?
Well, thankfully we have tools in the editing software that do a bit of that work for us. So we have, I have an assistant editor that takes the cameras, like let's say there were 3 cameras shot for one take, right? They'll take those cameras and group them together so I can watch all 3 simultaneously on a monitor. And I can actually watch up to 9 cameras simultaneously at any given time, which does happen sometimes. Certainly on the reality shows that I used to do, we would have 16, 18 cameras sometimes for big live to tape events. And then separately, the editing software it brings up the script, so you can have the script as it's written by Taylor, and then you can attach the little pieces of video to the specific parts of the script that they go to.
That's awesome.
So I will have a digital version of the script that I'm scrolling down saying, okay, so for this line, I have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different options, and I can just click through them all, and it just like quickly see what each take looked like for each actor and for each camera. That said, it's still incredibly daunting. It's a ton of material. I think for episode 1 of 1883, we really did shoot almost 80 hours of footage. Yeah, and a lot of episodes, and so you just have to dig in and start doing it, and just what is someone told me one time that how do you eat an elephant, like one bite at a time? Yeah. It's that whole thing of like you just have to start. Once you've started and you start seeing how the takes progress, how the performances develop, you very quickly start to feel like, okay, I've got this. We're going to start here. We're going to move over here. What do I want to see next? That's the rule of thumb for editing. It's like, what do you want to see next to tell the story? Well, I want to see a close-up of this character. And then, she put something down on the table. I want to see that. So I have to pop out to a wider shot to see what she put down on the table. Or, that paraphrasing, but that's sort of what you do. And it's very meticulous, and it takes some time. And you often don't have as much time as you would like to have to do it. The more that you do it, the more you just trust your own instincts, and there's not a lot of time to go back and second guess yourself, especially in the initial build of a TV show or a film. Because everyone just wants to see it. Everyone's been working so hard and they've been shooting and they just want to see the cut as quickly as possible. And so you have to balance that. Well, is this good? Yeah, I think this is good. And it's also fast. And then it allows people to assess the work that they've been doing. Yeah. And that happens on a TV show on a day-to-day basis. The schedule is pretty relentless.
Yeah. And so are you editing,
just chip away at it.
Are you editing simultaneously as they're shooting? Did they get through the whole production?
Very much so. Okay. Yeah, very much so. For Those Who Wish Me Dead, I had a full cut of the full movie, I think 2 or 3 weeks after they wrapped.
That's awesome.
So I was very much trying to keep up to camera, we call it. And then I took a few weeks to polish it, to score it, and do all that. And that was the first cut of the movie. That cut was probably 2 hours. I think it was 2 hours and 20 minutes, and the movie ended up being like 94 minutes. And so you certainly work on it from there, but just to get that first build out. Yeah. For Yellowstone, we have a little bit of a challenge in that we tend to shoot in somewhat remote places, at least in Montana, and so it might take a day or two for the footage even to get to me or one of the other editors. But then you try to turn it around that same day, and it feels impossible, and then you start doing it for a while and realize like, oh, I can do that, and you just get into a rhythm of it. Yeah. And so we're very much trying to keep up to what they're doing, because again, there are times when a scene has been shot that required a big set build, for instance, and
Yeah.
they need to know, can we tear down this set?
Or
Because
do
we
you
have to
need-
tear it down to move on to the next, or do we have to shoot it again? Or
Yeah,
do we
do
have
we
to
need-
pick up anything?
Yep. That's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Like, that's
So you need to be,
like, are you, because like I remember, like times where I've shot something and afterwards I was like, whoa, I didn't get that shot. And I can only
Absolutely.
imagine on a big set, that you have all these things. And so it makes so much sense
Yeah.
that you guys are doing it.
and
in
there's
real
a
time.
there's a little bit of time built in for that process of discovery, but sometimes there just isn't, because the company has to move to a new spot, and so you might just push through all night on a scene just because it's very important that the production, the director, all the producers, cinematographers get to assess what we have and make sure that everyone was comfortable with striking that set and moving on. So that's there's a pressure to the job, but that again, you just get used to it. It's not everyone is on the same team, but you have to do, for in those instances, my role is to make sure that everyone can properly assess where we are, and so you just have to step up and do that.
It's awesome. Yeah. That's really awesome, though. But how
It's fun.
How did you get to this point? Like, how did you, were you, how did you say to end up in this career? How did you find this?
Oh God, I was going to be a doctor.
I dropped out of medical school to go into film.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, you made it all the way to medical school. I made it through organic chemistry. I made it through a year and a half of undergraduate prep courses that you would take to go to medical school. It's the worst. And it was also, I went to, as an undergraduate, I went to UC Davis. It was the only class that started at 7:30 in the morning. 8 o'clock is usually like the earliest time for a college class. And it was like that extra little twist of the knife. But no, I was, look, I mean, if you go back far enough, I have a somewhat common story to people that end up doing what I do. I loved movies, but then I would always, with my friend that lived across the fence, we would make these little plays together, like detective and villain, and like be acting like it's 7, 8 years old, I'm using the swing set as like our set, and like the scaffolding that someone would fall from, so I did a lot of that. Just playing around with storytelling at an early age. I was not one of those kids that had a video camera, though. Those were really, really expensive. I was a child of the 70s and 80s, so we just didn't have that. But we could play in the backyard and use our imaginations. But it's interesting. As I got older, as much as I thought I wanted to work in movies, right? Really, I didn't think of working in television. It just sounded like a very fantastical kind of thing. I couldn't imagine it as a job that people did, or that there was a way that there was a path to. It sounded like a lottery ticket or something, where someone decides like, hey, you get to make movies. So I did what a lot of people do that have that dream, which is to try to keep myself grounded in something that at least to me sounded practical. Right. So I was going to be a doctor, for instance. Well, I hated science, and that's a problem. So again, when I was a sophomore in college, I switched my major to sociology, which is a subject that I was fascinated in. And it was around that time that I decided I was going to at least apply to film school as a graduate student.
That's awesome.
And I tried to talk myself into maybe I could be a lawyer or whatever, and that's what I would tell my family. And it wasn't that my family wasn't supportive. I was just had this doubt and uncertainty about how the hell am I going to make a living doing what I want to do for a living. Well, I can apply to film school. And so I did. And the only film school I wanted to go to was USC. And I don't really know why. But I applied and thankfully I got in. And when I got into film school, again, like a lot of people that go to film school, I was like, well, I'm going to be a director. Because that's what everybody knows. That's the job that everybody knows. Well, in our first semester, the graduate program, we make 5 short films. With the rules were that you weren't allowed to have synced dialogues. It was entirely visual storytelling, which is actually a fantastic exercise. Yeah. And I enjoyed it, shooting and all of that. But what I really liked was when I started editing them, I realized that this is fun. Yeah. It just felt natural to me, and it clicked with me. It was about putting pictures together, but also music. I was a classical musician, an amateur classical musician until my early 20s. And so it takes advantage of that part of my training, just like understanding how to cut music and again, starting very simply, but all of it made sense right away.
Yeah.
And then I hadn't wanted to do anything else since. I mean, I just started editing a lot. And the way that USC works, which is nice, is that you can edit someone else's thesis project. There are several ways to finish the master's program. One is to direct a thesis film, a short film, and that's what most people do. They crew it from the other students and people that you've built relationships with over the years. So I started editing a lot of thesis projects. I usually had 2 or 3 films going simultaneously. I would spend the night in the editing lab. I just did it all the time. And, I had good luck with, by the time I left, I'd cut 2 little shorts that went to Sundance. One of them had gone to Cannes. Like I just had, just had some really cool experiences and made some lifelong friends. So I guess what's important is that, you have to listen to where your successes are coming from. Right.
Yes.
So my successes were coming to me as an editor, and I was getting this feedback like, hey, we like your work. And my to myself, I was like, man, I love this. This is really fun. Yeah. It's thrilling. It's thrilling, then to put together a student short and watch it for the first time by myself at 3:00 in the morning in an editing lab, and I still get that same pleasure today out of watching an episode that I put together for the first time. Because I have friends that I went to school with that haven't found that what makes sense to them. And I think that in some cases it's because it's still trying to fit the square peg in the round hole. Like I'm going to be a director. Yes. Whatever the world is telling me, be damned. Like this is what I'm going to do because it sounds correct. I never cared about that. I approached it from a very practical standpoint. I wanted to work. I wanted to have a career. I wanted to, do things that I found rewarding creatively. And thankfully, just in listening to my gut and listening to what life was telling me, I've been able to do that. And then extending out from there, it was never like I started working in documentaries and reality TV. I did that for years and I loved all of it. I mean, each one, there were other friends, like when I left school, for instance, my first jobs that were available to me were editing documentary stuff for like Discovery Channel, History Channel, National Geographic. That's just what was there.
That's awesome. I was a history major, so that sounds awesome to me.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, because I was also at the time, especially, I was in my mid to late 20s, and that was the stuff I would have on when I go to bed, and I would like listening to those shows and watching them. But there were folks that were like, okay, they made it through school, but now they wouldn't settle for anything other than like, I need to direct a feature, I need to do this, that. And my approach to it was just, well, this is the job that's in front of me. What can I learn? One of my early, there were cool experiences to be had in all of those arenas if you were looking for them. I mean, one of my early jobs was my mentor at USC, my editing mentor. Yeah, a guy who taught me how to use Avid, which is the editing software that we all use. And he was editing a lot of James Cameron's underwater documentaries. At the time, the Ghost of the Abyss, Aliens of the Deep, and all that stuff. So one of my early jobs was working at Lightstorm and digitizing tapes overnight for James Cameron documentaries. And I was walking through there like, oh, there's the Terminator poster. Like, this is cool. Like, this is there were really fun, exciting things to be had there. And experiences to be had. And later on, when I got the chance to do some reality TV, there's a lot of folks that turned their nose up at that kind of thing. Look, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay and I'm going to make the feature film. Well, hell, I loved working in reality TV. It's awesome. And it's really hard and it's really fun. And there are really smart, hardworking people that do that for a living. And as an editor, it taught me so many things because when you do a reality show, your audience, without being able to articulate this to you, nor should they expect the same dramatic beats as when they watch a script. They want to see people fall in love, break up, get angry, get hurt, get revenge, all of those things. But you have to, in a lot of ways, conjure it out of or at least the distilling down of that is so incredibly challenging compared to working in the scripted world. So I had these, so for the 10, 11 years that I was doing reality TV, what I was practicing without realizing it is just the clarity and like story clarity and how to take what is just a jumbled mess and or just a mountain of footage and distill that down into a story arc that's clear to people and that satisfies what an audience wants from a show, which is to go on an emotional journey with characters. Yes. The joke to reality editors is always, like, can you imagine if we gave the people a piece of paper with words on it that we wanted them to say, and then they did that, and then we, like, that's scripted film and television has its own challenges for sure, but you really, I benefited a great deal from that training, that accidental training of telling stories out of just a mass of stuff and learning how to make that clear. And I've benefited professionally from that. And then the reason I'm where I am right now, specifically working for Taylor, is a friend that I know from working in reality television. So just a guy I've known for 15 years who's a friend of Taylor's and who introduced us. And so, through not ignoring, through just taking advantage of what was in front of me, really, to me is the when I look at the lesson of my career, it's so random. It's not anything that I could have predicted, but I just took what was in front of me and learned what I could and enjoyed it, made friends, kept working hard and kept always learning something. And it's the collective, collection of those skills that benefit me now in my scripted work, which might be the most prestigious, just in general, people kind of assign that prestige to scripted shows versus like The Bachelor, which I did for a long time, which I loved. Again, I loved doing it. But to me, they're just different. It's all storytelling. I value neither one more than the other. I've had wonderful experiences working in all of those realms. So that's kind of it. That's
awesome.
That's basics of my story, I guess.
One of the things that you said there that I really like, there was a couple things, like the idea of like leaning in to where things are working is something that I preach to my friends and to people that I'm around, and like to preach to myself. Like,
sure,
you can. I was talking to my friend with the analogy once of like different projects are like, each project is like rolling a ball up a hill. Different balls of different sizes, and some of them just start rolling downhill. You're pushing up. Some things just roll. Some things, no matter how hard, it doesn't move. And instead of wasting your energy trying to get something moving that doesn't, pay attention to what does, because there's lessons to be learned everywhere. And who's to say that something really amazing doesn't come out of that? I was.
You can't predict it. It's impossible to predict, and that's why you just have to trust your gut in the moment. Just go full force into whatever it is that's presented to you, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And because you don't know where it leads, you have no idea, and you have no idea.
Right.
There was when I first moved to Vietnam, they have it's an outdoor culture, and one of the cool things is,
which part of Vietnam are you in?
I'm in Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City now.
Okay.
And motorcycle culture. It's an awesome city.
Oh yeah.
And they've got this.
My
thing
wife and I spent a few weeks there a number of years ago, and went from across the country. It's a fascinating place with amazing food.
The food is. My mother-in-law is an amazing cook as well. So like we just are never lacking for phenomenal
you're very
food
lucky.
in the sense. So we were, but they have this one thing here in the culture that's called di yam yam. And I was like, well, what is that? When I came here, and I remember once my friends were like, we're going to go out. And I was like, well, where are we going to go? Di yam yam. And I was like, okay, what does that mean, man? And I learned go means go, yum yum means around. Okay. And so the idea was that before, movie theaters came here, before a lot of the different entertainment came here in the early 2000s, it was like one of the main activities was just drive around the city. And one of the cool things with it was like, traveling with no fixed destination. No one had any idea where we were going, and you just went. And what I noticed from that, and one of the coolest things I noticed to that was like what Carl Jung described as synchronicity, that you would bump into people, and it would just be these random situations that came together, but there was always an adventure to be had. And those adventures were just so much more rich because, we would just show up somewhere and then, oh, you're here. And then you join in with that friend and you guys all go somewhere else. And you never know, what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, it's the only way to do it, I think. I mean, if I had just been as singularly stubborn and focused about what my initial plan was about being a film director, I wouldn't. I mean, I blinked my eyes, and I've had this really interesting, rewarding 20-year career so far as an editor. And so I think, and again, I say there's a bit of a cautionary tale to that, because there are folks that have not that I know that haven't done that, and I think are still waiting to do the thing that they wanted to do 20 years ago, instead of like, the whole life is what happens to you while you're waiting for your dreams to come true, right? Like,
Right.
life is what happens to you when you're waiting for your dreams to come true. Like, that's we hear that all the time, and it's true. You don't do yourself any favors by relentlessly pursuing something that doesn't want you. And I think that, if you can just find out what you love, and what you enjoy doing, the rest of it comes. I just wanted a job. I wanted to like when I was in graduate school, I was broke. Like, I just wanted to work, and I wanted to make a living. And thankfully I found myself in a job that very much does that. But I didn't pick it because it was lucrative or because there were like financial rewards. I didn't know what they were. I just knew that I wanted a job, and I wanted to do something that I enjoyed. And I think if if people find that and listen to that, like, and ignore what they think they're supposed to do, or what sounds responsible, and just pursue it, and you will find your way to be successful. Look, I had a friend when I was an undergraduate. I worked at a grocery store. That was my college job. I was a checker at a grocery store, and I had a friend there who was a fantastic artist, and he would draw like comics and all these kinds of things. He was really, really talented. And you'd ask him what do you want to do. He said, "Well, I'm going to be a doctor." I said, "Why do you want to be a doctor?" He's like, "Well, there's something about wearing that white coat. It's so prestigious." Now, I can imagine, like, I'm not in touch with him, and this is over 20 years ago. I imagine he didn't end up as a doctor, probably, and I hope he ended up as an artist. And I hope he didn't take all that long to start listening to the part of him that said you should be an artist, and to what other people were saying to him, which is that you should be an artist. There's you want to listen to that voice early, I think, because the earlier you listen to it, the earlier you can start having the inevitable successes and failures that are going to come from the pursuit of any career. But at least you're experiencing them on the path to something worthwhile that ultimately you should be doing. It happens a lot in my business. People who want to be actors and actresses. It's all very tough, and you've got to decide how long you want to stick with it before you do something else or find that success. And I'm of the opinion that you should just listen early and often to yourself, and to really be honest with yourself about what you have to offer, what you're really great at, and how you want to live your life. If you want to live your life like doing something you enjoy, or constantly scratching and clawing for something that just doesn't want you.
I started out in LA doing the whole acting thing. That's how I started. And
it's a tough life, man.
My God. And then like I did all the classes, I did everything. And it was like, no matter how hard I tried, I felt like I wasn't making any progress. And then suddenly I slipped behind the camera, and I was like, well, I started doing new media for, UFC fighters and athletes and all these musicians. And that kind of became my thing. And it took off. And I was sitting there going, I can try to hold on to this and just but I just like, man, I want to make money. I want to be, I want to, and do things that I'm good at, and have fun with it. And I think that, but so many, I had a friend the other day who posted, he's like, I just turned 52. And, I haven't had the career that I wanted. And he's at that point now saying, I wish I could just move home and work in the movie theater in my town. And it's like, and I'm not hating on that. I respect him. And he's had a really interesting career, but he's sitting there, and I don't think he's able to see, he still is looking at those dreams and not acknowledging the really cool career that he has had. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does. And look, this isn't, I don't think we're telling a story about giving up on your dreams. I mean, I am actually living my dream. Yeah. I'm just living a different dream than what I initially thought. Like, there is no, if you do what I do for a living, there's just about no cooler spot to be in my opinion, than working on the stuff that I get to work on. And I feel lucky, pinch myself every day, that whole thing. But it's just about making sure that, like, you're not, live the right dream, like live the dream that your life is telling you, as opposed to some other dream that worked for somebody else. You know, when I was when I was finishing high school, getting into college, so the late 90s, and so Clerks was like the big thing. Kevin Smith had made this movie, and he'd maxed out every credit card. Yeah. And then all my friends started maxing out all their credit cards, getting into enormous debt trying to make movies because that's what Kevin Smith did. It's like, that worked for him because he's a very unique, special talent. And in that time, in that moment, his voice really just resonated with people. Yeah. That doesn't mean that everybody should max out their credit cards and get themselves $50,000 in debt because that's how you get successful. No, that's not your path. That was his. What is your path? You know, what should you be doing? Maybe you should spend $5,000 and make a short film and decide if you like it. I actually did that before I ever applied to film school. I made 2 16mm short films. One of them I ended up using as a credit in college. I have a film studies minor along with my sociology degree from UC Davis, and so I was able to do one for credit, and the other one, another 16mm short, because we were still working on film back then, that I just did for fun, and I really loved it. You know, when I applied to film school, I at least had this belief that like, okay, directing movies is something that I like. I have tried it. I find it thrilling. I really enjoy it. But then once I got in, and then being willing to make that pivot to like, oh, you should be doing this. This is the, you know, all of your talents lead you to this job. And so anyway, the dream just changed, but it's still the dream. Like I'm very happy in my career and then all the wonderful experiences that it has afforded me. So.
Well, there's another thing there too. Like, my wife always has this great, because she grew up in a very different culture. And, you know, and the Vietnamese culture, a lot of cultures in Asia are much more rigid with kind of social structure and social hierarchy and some of the social rules about, you know, how to get ahead. And my wife would always look at me and she's like, don't play fair. And she wasn't saying to cheat, but she meant like, if you want to get somewhere, then you have to be. One of the things that I was noticing is, how do I say it? You like, some people will work for ages to get ahead as an actor, right? But then you look at a guy who, you know, now, you know, someone like, you know, a singer will get cast as the actor. Like, maybe your path is music. You know what I mean? Maybe your path is this. It's like, you hit the nail on the head with your way of doing something doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You know, like for me, I was trying to do the film thing in LA, and then I wasn't pulling it off, man. So I moved back to Vietnam because I spoke Vietnamese and I had a network here, and my career took off because I was able to do it my way. And it's a very
complicated language. Good for you for being able to learn.
I've rapped in Vietnamese. I've got this awesome song that's a hit for my wife. I have no idea.
Very impressive.
It was a great editor that helped me and a recording engineer that helped me get through that.
Well, look, I mean, talking about how you end up at the finish line, like I wouldn't be working for Taylor Sheridan if I hadn't edited The Hills, which was a reality show on MTV back in the early. That's just where I met the person who ended up connecting me to Taylor Sheridan. I met him 15 years ago with no knowledge or expectation that it would, I mean, just a colleague, a friend. And we worked together. We worked together on The Bachelor for years. But that's the reason I worked for Taylor. It's not because I said, I'm only ever going to do scripted TV shows. I'm going to, you know, whatever. It was just from accidentally taking the opportunities that were in front of me, meeting people, making the most of them. And this is what I lucked into. And then, you know, you have to give, you have to acknowledge the luck of the whole thing, right? There are a lot of people who have the talent to do what I do. Plenty of people. And it's just the opportunity thing. And the opportunity is what you can't predict. And so I think but one thing you can predict is that if you keep yourself closed in and in single-mindedly pursuing one goal, you won't meet anybody. You'll just be like, you know, if you keep yourself in your room, always hammering away at screenplays and never getting out, working with people and building relationships, then I'll guarantee you won't get those kind of opportunities because there's one path forward to success. And that is you having this thing be discovered, which is the least likely way that people find their way forward in this business, certainly. Yeah. I tell people that are starting out, kids, college kids or whatever, that when you begin in entertainment, your personality is far more important than your skill set. Because if you're a hard worker and people enjoy being around you, they will want to teach you the things that you need to be successful professionally. We've all had those people in our lives to get us to where we are. But you have to be out there. You have to put yourself into the world. You have to be open to trying things that you weren't maybe thinking would work for you, and just seeing what you can. And then if you don't like it, guess what? Don't do it again.
Yep, exactly.
But if you want to be, if you want to, go do a reality show, a documentary, whatever it is, or a commercial, or there are professionals working in all of those spaces that are people that are worth your time, that will want to teach you what they know and have valuable lessons to teach. Whether it's wedding video. I shot wedding videos just to make some money when I was in film school. Met some nice people doing it. Right. I was a camera operator for horse racing at Los Alamitos racetrack.
Awesome,
it was fun. It was fun, and it was just another one of those experiences. It got me a little money when I needed it, and I just met people and tried different things. So I think getting into spaces that are uncomfortable, getting yourself into just spaces wherever they are, and getting out and doing work and meeting people is important. There's no greater lesson to me than, in my career, I think, than that, which is just like go out and then make the most of what's in front of you. And then you'll meet someone that 10, 15 years later turns your life in a different direction in a way that you weren't expecting, just because they like working with you. So,
Did you ever read? There's a great author, Eric Barker. He's got a really great blog that he posts on a lot, and he has got this book that's an extremely scientific book on success. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he said is like, people who think they're lucky actually end up being more lucky, but it has nothing to do with luck. What it is that they try more, and they put themselves out there. They take chances more, and it simply is taking a chance puts you in a space where you get ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And I think people who feel lucky tend to be, optimistic, and optimism is a positive trait in people. And so when you meet someone who's optimistic, they affect you in a positive way, and you remember that about them. I've worked with PAs, kids who are just starting out, and they feel like the luckiest person in the world to have the job they have. And then what that says to me is like, okay, if I have a chance to either recommend them or to hire them directly for something that has a bit more responsibility in the future, I will, because their optimism is contagious. Those are the kind of folks that you want to have around. It happens that way. People work their way up because they get. So you have to be a little uncomfortable from time to time, otherwise you're not growing professionally, right? You have to be a little bit in over your head every once in a while. I have absolutely done that. But usually people that are around you will maybe acknowledge that, and then again they want to share information with you. One of the editors on 1883 is my longtime assistant editor, and she's very talented, and she worked incredibly hard, and is an unflappable person that Taylor decided he wanted to promote to editor, and I wholeheartedly agreed. And now she cuts episodes with me, and didn't take the job expecting that, but had that kind of drive and enthusiasm and work ethic that led to that. Because we would rather have someone like her, who we know and who's a known quantity, than to try to find another random person off the streets who may have more experience on paper but is an unknown personality wise. And someone with the wrong personality can sink your show, just like they can on any job, right? It's your personality. It's what you bring to it.
I've been reading this really interesting book called The 48 Laws of Power. And the topic for today was actually on, like, be careful of people that are like negatives, because they really can. And there's all these stories throughout history that this guy referenced about people who just were just, if you get into that negativity, man, it will take you down. So you just have to you have to surround yourself by positive. I
mean, especially in our, for my job, for instance, in our artistic medium that is, by its nature, very critical. Like, you have to be comfortable receiving criticism when you do what I do for a living.
Definitely.
If you're not comfortable receiving criticism, you don't get to be an editor. Like, you're not no. It's just the way that it works. So in an environment where already we are judged critically, and necessarily so, to have people who then take that and let that really wallow in the negativity, or you let that affect them, then it can, I think, disproportionately affect the quality of the work or the environment. Right now we are all still working at home.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and I expect to do that for a long time, but not so long ago we were in offices together, and there might be a couple of editors on the TV show, and there's a vibe that develops, and you want to have people that you enjoy working with. You want to cut something and bring someone else in and say, hey, what do you think about this? I just put the sequence together. What do you think? And you need to have someone who can interact with you critically in the way that you expect, but who doesn't just like, oh, this is miserable, this is terrible, we're all going to get fired, because there are those people, and it just affects the mood of the show or of the production or what have you. So it's really important. I mean, we don't lie to ourselves about how well we're doing. We're just like handling it professionally. You have to be able to read the good reviews and the bad reviews and not get too high or too low on either one. Right, because that's just the nature of what we do. When you're assessed critically on something that you have artistic and emotional investment in, you just have to have that detachment that doesn't become just depression or the woe is me kind of attitude. So
yeah, and it's tricky for a lot of people to do. It's tricky for people to have that separation. There is the work. It's
very hard. Yeah,
this is the work.
Well, I mean, if you're being judged, like, this is what I've done, and someone's saying, you know what, no, I don't like it. and what you hear is like, you're a terrible person as well. And that's not what they're saying. But it's hard not to hear that and feel that, because you have emotional investment of it, whether you're a musician, whether you're putting together a music video or a feature film. You have emotional investment in what the result is, right? And it's difficult. It's a lesson learned over it gets easier over the years. I have people that will watch something maybe that I've done and say, I didn't really like that, I'm sorry, and they always apologize. Like, that's you don't have to apologize to me. I can take it. Like, that's fine. That's a normal part of what we do. Some things speak to you artistically, some things don't. There are people that set their clocks to The Bachelor being on Monday night, and there's others that think that, like, oh, I can't believe you would waste your time that way. And neither of them is wrong, but certainly neither of them is right. Like, for me, I get to choose what has value to me artistically. I get to choose, the extent to which I will allow criticism to impact my work or my feelings about my work. And everyone has that same choice to make. And you just have to, I think, find a way to not let it affect you as much. Certainly, if you're going to pursue something as crazy as acting, as being a musician, as being a film director or what have you, because there's already enough pressure.
Now, if you could go back in time and give some advice to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
I would probably just say it's going to be okay. Like, I'm happy with how I've lived the career part of my life, and I'm happy with how a lot of things have worked out. I guess I would say just keep doing what you're doing, and like try everything. Like, I wouldn't do too much differently, because it just happened to have worked out. Would I maybe say a little bit younger to myself, like, you don't want to be a doctor, you idiot. Like, that's not your path. Maybe, but thankfully I found out in time. I found out when I was in my early 20s that wasn't, late teens, early 20s, that wasn't what I was supposed to do. But I wouldn't change a whole lot else, because, whatever I've come through to in my career, I've come by honestly through like a genuine interest and enthusiasm for what I'm doing. And that's what I would, the advice that I would share to others is that really just, again, listen to yourself, listen to what life is telling you, and try to find, to make the most out of where you are, and to try to find a path forward that relies on what your true passions are, not what on your projected image of what your passions should be or what might be responsible. You have to be true to your own your own skills, your own desires. Otherwise, you're just not going to be happy, or you're not going to be fulfilled in the work that you do. I mean, there's a lot of doctors out there that are miserable because they didn't really want to be a doctor, but they wanted to pay their bills. And there's a lot of ways to pay your bills. There really are. Like if you are passionate about something and you put everything into it, you will find a way to pay your bills with that. I really believe that.
I really love that. This was a conversation I had with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
I love teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I love teaching people, educating people. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I've talked to, whether it's an actor or a UFC fighter, as I've been helping like coach people for the past 15 years, on building out their media,
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, at the end of the day, you're educating people. What do you want to teach? What do you want to share? Like, what information are you trying to share? Because that at the highest level is what people can do with their own new media. And that's kind of the approach I've always had. But I also have both parents that were educators and worked in higher education. And so that was kind of something that was drilled into me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was one of the reasons I kicked off my podcast, is because I was like, I want to share interesting stories and help people get access to information, because I don't have all the answers. I don't. I like to think I'm a pretty knowledgeable person, but let's be real. I'm one person in that one person's experience. And so I wanted to bring together people in a place. And it was something that started working for me. It started just, it felt effortless and it felt fun. And I was like, I turned to my wife and I was like, I'm leaning in on this because it's working, and you never know. It's like,
well, it works because it's authentic to who you are. I mean, look, we live in a time where it's very easy to fall into the trap of trying to construct the life that you think you want others to see, right? I mean, that's what all the Instagram. There's the Instagram version of someone's life, and then there's the real version of someone's life, and they're rarely the same. And we feel this pressure to do that, to perform, and because it's easier than ever to have a public image of yourself that is actually not quite true, or in some cases really not at all accurate to who you are. Thankfully, because of where I am generationally, like I didn't fall into that the same way. Like I think if you're in your 20s and 30s today, it's probably really, really difficult. But what it can lead to is that same thing. I need to look like I'm having a great time. I need to look like I'm really rich. I need to look like I spend all my time on boats and planes. And I need to look like I have this career that, or what have you. But ultimately, none of those things are going to matter in your life. You're not going to look back 20 years from now and think about that great post that you nailed that got 1,000 likes or what have you. Like you're going to think about, what is the life that I'm living right now? And the life that you're living right now is going to depend on the decisions and pursuits that you made 20 years ago. And if you listen to your own voice, then I think that you probably can't help but be at least satisfied somewhat with where you end up. And I would just imagine, and also having seen it in friends and others, that like if you're constantly trying to live a life that isn't authentic to who you are, you will turn 52 and make a post about, like I'm not where I wanted to be. I mean, that's a reality. That's a thing that happens to folks. So, but it is avoidable.